Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Big Jiu-Jitsu Show. I'm Rob,
I'm Randy.
and we're picking another topic. So we've had two solid guests on the podcast these last two episodes, as Randy said. I wholeheartedly agree. So you get just us for now. So we're picking another topic to talk about, and I think we're doing competitions. Do you actually need to do them? Because that's
Yeah.
kind of a I don't know. It's kind of an interesting subject. I've seen a lot of. What's funny is we do mention it now, and I thought about it because I doom scroll through Instagram a lot because if I have nothing to do but sit on my couch and watch my dogs play with each other, I might just pull it out to like see what's on the Instagram reels, and one of them was, you know, is competition kind of like mandatory for belts? And I'm just gonna go ahead and throw out my opinion right off the bat, and I'm gonna say no, but and leave it at that for right now. What about you?
Also a no, but I think there's a lot of things that depend. And yeah, I agree with you. We had two solid guests. I really enjoyed. I went back and listened to those episodes just because sometimes when you're one of the co-hosts, you're thinking about kind of how to keep the conversation going or what question to ask next, and sometimes you're not absorbing as much as you'd like. And went back and listened and picked up some gems from Trevor and from Aaron. So two great guests. So now you can't eat at some like Michelin, what is the rating, like 5-star restaurant
Yeah.
every single time because then you're going to run your bank account dry. Sometimes you got to settle for some Mickey D's. And so you're getting Mickey D's today with just
Yeah.
me and Rob.
There could be no darkness or there could be no light without the darkness. So like,
Correct.
compared to like, I'm not eating at a steakhouse, I'm going to Panera Bread.
Yep. Yeah. We're
You
doing
gotta have
Panera
both.
today. Yep.
You
Yeah.
can't have all the good stuff.
Doing what is it you get at Panera, the deal? It's like a half and half or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
sandwich and soup, you know.
I usually go for a salad just because like I don't know why. I just love salads more than soups. But if it's cold out, then I get a soup, but usually I get a salad.
Their tomato soup is really good though.
It is.
Yeah.
Or you can just get that plain in the big bowl of bread or whatever the hell it is,
Yeah.
bread.
Yeah. But it's, in regards to competition and belts, I've seen that argument, and there are schools that are hell bent on that principle. I do not agree.
No, I don't either because there's a lot of people talk about sandbagging as well. So like I know you said like some schools really hold on to like either you compete or you don't promote. Like that's just how it is. And then even then some of them are like either you compete and you become a world champion in your belt or you don't promote. So blue belt, I don't know about you, but blue belt was hard enough as it was. I was there for a few years. Like and then you're going to add on I need to be the world champion at blue belt on top of that. Like I enjoyed competing when I was, coming up a bit, and I still enjoy competing. I just don't compete in jiu-jitsu primarily. So, like, I think if a school's like heavy into it, it's not wrong if you understand what you're getting into. But if you start jiu-jitsu and you're like, well, you have to compete and do well, like, I don't know. I think that kind of takes away from it, honestly.
Yeah, everyone has a different purpose for training too. I think that's the factor into the calculus is why your students are in the martial arts to begin with. And if you look at, yeah, there's some benefit. You get the adrenaline dump and you're going against a person you probably don't train with often, and there's a different drive and energy to competition, and the stress inoculation is a big piece of that. And I think that there is value in that. But if you have people that are in this because they just enjoy it, because they want to learn how to defend themselves or something else, competition may not be required. I'm not saying it's not beneficial. I think
Yeah.
you always pretty much always benefit from competition, but then also injury rate tends to increase because the intensity is higher. Um, there's the monetary aspect of competition, which can be a setback. These things aren't cheap, and sometimes the divisions aren't loaded. And so, how much are you paying to just go and get a high intensity role that you might have been able to get or at least get close to by visiting another gym's open mat? or hosting your own open mat at your own gym, or having an in-house competition that doesn't cost anything. There's ways around that, I think. That's not to say that competitions are inherently bad, in my opinion. I just think that they're over exaggerated in their value. That's just my opinion.
I can agree with that. I think, I have this feeling that you get a lot of experience. So like I always joke, it's like you get 1 month of experience for every tournament you do, it feels like, because you get to actually go out and use your A game against somebody else your same skill level or supposedly your same skill level, unless they're going for world champ for the seventh time that, at that belt.
Hmm.
But but you can, like I said, you can get that experience elsewhere. And, I've like you said, injuries go up, the cost of tournaments go up. I mean, when I was competing a lot, we were lucky enough that Arizona had a boatload of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments. So if you missed one, guess what? There's another one next month you can do. Or you can go to New Mexico or you can go over to California. It wasn't a far drive, but the monetary cost is not that great sometimes. It may be worth it, but I mean, I think that's a decision for you. And, I feel the somebody once told me one of the worst things for martial arts is tournaments. Because I'm going to go on the opposite side of it. So, like some schools are very heavily into tournaments. And I've seen a couple of schools who are like not into tournaments at all because of like what you said. You get injured. If you go in, you train really hard, and hopefully you have a pretty good support system in place with your instructors and stuff like that, and you lose. If you don't have that support structure, like who's going to be there? But hey, man, it's fine, dust it off, or like, well, you just suck. Like, get better and suck. Some people don't like to hear that. I guess those of us who are crazy enough to have had coaches like that, like, but be like, yeah, that's true. I do suck. I need to get better. Like, we're just a little different. However, I feel like normal person is not gonna, especially like white belt, blue belt, is not gonna handle a loss too well without that support of a coach or like a good friend or like, the adopt a white belt, brown belt, like buddy system they have. So that's kind of my thoughts, at least on the opposite end of the spectrum. We're like tournaments are bad, competition's bad for the martial art.
I think there can be some bad that comes out of it. And I think too,
Yeah.
you look at, so you have different levels of competitor, just like you have different levels of students and different reasons for being in it. And I think the other risk factor that people need to take into consideration when they talk about competition and its value is you have top tier competitors. So you have people that are aiming to be top tier competitors. So that's their drive. That's their why behind why they train. They knew coming in the door, maybe they came from a background of college wrestling or they have some type of athletic background already. They already have that drive to compete and they want to go as high as they can go. They want to be a professional or they want to be at least be top tier level competitor on the competition circuit. And that's fantastic. There's nothing at all wrong with that. And those guys, they bust their ass. They sacrifice a lot, and they train really hard. They get really good. But then you have the people that are pretty much hobbyist competitors in the sense that they go to a local tournament. They pay their fee, they go in and they compete, and they're just there to have fun, test themselves a little bit. And the problem is those two worlds tend to overlap a little bit in the competition circuit. And you're kind of hinted toward it, like the idea of sandbagging. And so my question would be to the people that think that competition is, I'm talking about the extreme side that only feel
Yeah.
like you can get promoted if you compete and are successful in the competition circuit. My question would be, okay, so you have students that are hobbyist competitors, and they compete maybe once a year just to go in there and test the water, say they did it, have a little bit of fun, get that adrenaline rush, but they're not serious about becoming professionals or anything like that. They're not trying to become world champions. They just want to go in there and compete. And if that's your attitude, you're probably not going to be a world champion, right? Like there has to be intention behind what you're doing. My question to those coaches or those gym owners then would be, okay, how is that really the difference between a promotion and not being promoted with a hobbyist competitor? Like, how much value do they get by going to one competition a year that they would have gotten from not going at all?
It's a,
Because you know what I'm saying? Because
yeah.
it's one tournament that you did in an entire year. It's going to take far more competitions than that to become very good at being a competitor. getting used to the process, getting used to the butterflies, the adrenaline, getting used to the scoring system and the environment that you're going to be competing in. It takes way more than just one. And so I think to me, they would get more benefit from more exposure to open mats at different gyms, training partners they don't typically train with, or in-house competitions that they could do 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. The once a year like competition, like, I consider myself a hobbyist competitor with a podcast. It's weird. Like whatever. It's unfortunately that's not our full-time jobs. If you guys could get us some Joe Rogan level money, then maybe we could do this full time and have a
Hell
cool
yeah.
setup. But I actually got to work. I got to do other stuff. And that's kind of, you know, something I weigh when I do competitions as well is like, what's the possibility of getting injured? What's the possibility of, pulling somebody like, what was it? Zanji Hibero went to like senior or masters five or something, an ultra heavyweight or whatever. And I'm just like, if I had competed at that, well, I'm not masters, but whatever division he was in, I was like, you pull Zanji Hibero the first round. Like, bro, I'm just packed. I'll go roll, but I'm like, hope the consolations treat me a lot better than the first round. But that's where the overlap happens. Like, I'm just a guy who wants to go out there and see how he does. And I haven't competed at black belt yet, just because I think I said it earlier. I'm just doing other stuff. Like I'm trying judo, I'm trying sambo, I'm trying all this stuff. Um, but like it's going to happen eventually. So I'm at the point where it's not going to discourage me if I lose. But like going back to what you said though, like what is that 1 month gonna do or that I'm sorry, that one competition, because I was thinking of it like one competition in 1 month. What's that one competition gonna really do for that person's progress? Honestly, if you want to be real about it too, because I keep talking about injuries, maybe they get injured. Now their progress is reset. But if they don't want to do it, that's fine. That's cool. If they want to do it, cool. But yeah, the one competition isn't going to really make that much difference for a hobbyist. And I think on top of that, maybe is it a fear for like watering down the art? Is a fear to like, for whatever reason, we're doing a disservice to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu by not forcing people to compete. So then we don't know where they are. But that's, I kind of disagree with that if that is the mindset.
Well, yeah, and I think watering down the art is exactly what happens when you introduce it to competition. I think it's different when you look at a context like the birth origins of something like the UFC, right?
Yeah.
Different then because it's any styles welcome, you know, testing your metal against other systems, and that's the extreme example. I'm not saying you should just go around and do Fight Club every day, and believe me, when I was a teenager, I did that and got my concussions and stuff to prove it, right? But the what I'm getting at is the Olympics. I used to hold this opinion that I would love to see jiu-jitsu in the Olympics, and I think it
Yeah.
was purely from a spectator standpoint. But when you really look at concern over the art, I don't think it would be good for jiu-jitsu to become an Olympic sport because you look at what it did to judo as a prime
Yeah.
example. You look at what it's done to taekwondo as an example. It becomes a limiting factor. It becomes a stunt of growth for that martial arts system because then it just becomes gobbled up in the rule set and the politics and the yeah, I don't want that for jiu-jitsu. It's a shame that that's the way it's gone, but it's just the reality of it. And so I think the people that would argue, I agree with you. People make that argument that competition prevents watering down of jiu-jitsu, but I would argue that it can long term have the opposite effect. It can actually cause it to become less effective, less pure in terms of what makes jiu-jitsu jiu-jitsu. And I don't mean purity in the sense of not absorbing other styles, because one of my favorite aspects of grappling right now is the the synergy between wrestling and jiu-jitsu. I love that.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that that's a concern I would have.
No, I agree with that because um I think like I at least speak from a Taekwondo standpoint. That you used to look at the Olympic style fights when they're first like we're getting up there and you're like, holy cow, these guys, you could win by knockout. That's the way it used to be. You could win a tournament or you can win a match by knockout. But now it's more efficient or effective to throw I don't even want to call it a kick. It's like a tap for it to be considered a point because I remember the old rule set, it was called trembling force. and like you had to kick somebody, not even like knocking out or punch them, to a point where you're like, yeah, that actually would have like hurt or been like done enough damage to somebody to be like, ooh, yeah, that's a pretty hard kick or punch. But now it is legit turned into how quickly and lightly I can tap somebody in a tournament setting, which realistically, that's not a fight. That's not the martial art. That's a super advanced form of tag that, we could do something similar in jiu-jitsu where it's like, we can only do this one move, but if you get it in the position and you don't finish it, we're going to count it as a submission. I feel like that's basically the same thing at that point. You're not exercising what the art is supposed to do. Like you're just now stopping it with like, well, this is the rule set. We're going to play to the rule set. And judo, like from everything I've talked to with my judo sensei and like all this other stuff, is that it used to be grabbing legs, doing crazy throws, like all this stuff. But now it's like you can only grab a certain way for this amount of time. If you do in another grip, you better do like something in 3 seconds, otherwise it's wrong. And you can't like duck under the arm. So you can't like do a duck under, you can't grab legs, you can't do like most of the cool stuff or the effective stuff. So and it's the Olympic style rules, which dominates most of judo, it seems like. So it's you're not wrong. If we put jujitsu in the Olympics, I truly feel like it would just turn it into a bastardization of what we have trained in.
Yeah, and I think judo is a prime example of what I think would happen to jiu-jitsu in competition. I mean, it's crazy that you can't attack the legs in judo for a takedown. Like I can't shoot a double leg, take somebody down. That's insane to me. I mean, I know Greco-Roman is the next comparison basis, and I get that that's a whole separate, but that's because Greco-Roman was built that way.
Yeah.
Like that was the point of that is upper body throws, affecting upper body to create throws. Like that was how it came about from its origin. Judo didn't come around like that. You took that out. You separated that. So you've watered down the art. That's the concern. I mean, there are variations. They don't call it a double leg in judo curriculum where
Yeah.
they attack the legs to score a takedown, but they can't do that in competition. Like it's just like what? That doesn't. I don't understand. And then the restrictions to the ground fighting aspect. They have newaza in judo,
Yeah.
and people wonder why so many judo schools grappling on the ground sucks. I'm not saying all, but a lot. I mean, as a blue belt, I tapped out a judo black belt in class in newaza. That should not happen often, and it wasn't one of those like instructor roles either. Um, it's like now there are judo schools out there that have legit ground fighting. So I'm not casting shade on the art across the board, but I think a lot of those judo schools fall victim to that exact thing is that they got so focused on competition that they started to almost dumb down or water down what they were doing, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I always kind of laugh because I'll say I now realize I say some of the same shit too, but I'm like, you can't use this in competition, but it's good to know. So like wrist locks for white belts, I still will teach a couple just because I'm like, you guys need to know how to do this. And I always laugh too. It's like the art was here originally for self-defense. That's the way it was. The Gracie family was like, let's create this kick-ass fighting style. And I'm gonna either anger or make a lot of people happy with this, but and we're just gonna steal a lot of the moves from judo and jujitsu, like Japanese jujitsu. It's whatever. You can only bend an arm so many ways. Who cares? Like it is what it is. But I have the Gracie. I don't want to say Masterworks, but the one that Helio put out like years and years and years ago, where it goes through like all of the techniques. So like the standing self defense, the strikes, like the throws, the stuff of that. Like that to me is like what I thought of when I thought of doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu because of Pride, because of UFC, like all that stuff. So you eventually get to the point where like half that stuff's taken out and you can only do certain amount of moves because that's what we work to for competition because the goal now is competition. And I don't know if there's like a weird point in time where the grappling competition became like the goal. You know what I mean? Like I think the Karate Kid was the one that really put all the, the karate tournaments into, like, yeah, dude, I want to do karate. So I go fight in tournaments. And then you get to a tournament and you're like, this is nothing like the Karate Kid. Like you used to have no pads or whatever, but it's just not. And I think the same thing now. Like, I don't think the UFC really did that, but a lot of maybe the stuff you get on Fight Pass helped out with that. But I still see a lot of people just go to train, and if they want to compete, they compete, and if they don't, they don't. Whereas like schools shut down, like karate schools shut down for tournaments, and they just send everybody, and everybody goes and competes.
Yeah, it's Karate Kid. I love Karate Kid, by the way.
Oh,
Cobra Kai, new series, amazing. Love it all. Still wish, not that anybody of extreme importance is listening, but I still wish they would do a prequel series on Mr. Miyagi.
that would be
I,
cool.
I think that'd be freaking awesome, covering all his time during like World War II and, you know, meeting his wife and coming to America and his journey through karate. I think that would just be an incredible story. But anyway, no, I totally agree. Um, it's again, I'm not trying to paint this picture like I or we are anti-competition because that's not the case. I just think that it's not the end all be all that some people make it out to be. That's my only point. And we've all, if you've trained jiu-jitsu long enough, you've all gone to a school. And there's one person I'm thinking about right now as a prime example of this. You go to a school and it may be a gym full of high level competitors. And there's somebody in that gym, some OG that's been doing jiu-jitsu for, decades, that just everybody in that gym is like, don't slip up when you're rolling with him. He'll catch
Yeah,
you, man. And I'm thinking that there's a guy that comes around every now and then, one of the OGs at TFTC, we call him Buddy, and he was training at Salty Dog, and there's some killers at Salty Dog. These guys
yeah,
are pro fighters and stuff, and I mean everybody had respect for his ability on the mat, and he's like a boa constrictor when he gets on you, and he doesn't compete. I don't think he's ever competed in jiu-jitsu, but the type of work he's putting in every day on the mat speaks for itself, and then there's also the other part of it where there are some people that and there's theories and studies that talk about why this is the case and stuff. But there are people that just rise to the occasion for a competition, and there are the people that don't. And it
yeah,
is what it is. I mean, we had Trevor Hayes on here talking about his competition experience and lack of success in that venue. The guy was born to be a coach and does a phenomenal job as an instructor. And if we had this attitude that if you don't compete, you ain't shit, well, you wouldn't have a Trevor Hayes that who's developing very successful fighters. And there's countless examples of that out there in the world. And I think that it's something I would like to say I think it's something worth experiencing at least once in your journey.
yeah. I agree.
And if it's your passion, if it's your cup of tea, then get after it. Go for it. There's a lot of benefits to be reaped from competition. But I just don't like the idea that if you don't compete, you can't progress or you're not legit. I think that's horseshit.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's probably our primary, I'd say almost takeaway from this. Not really takeaway is that, you can compete. I do think, like you said, doing one competition, see if you like it or not, is good. And I think you should probably train up for that that one time though. Don't go in cold, get some extra cardio in, do whatever you need to get ready for it because you want to give it your best shot. Don't go and just be like, oh, the only competition experience you have is you rolled out of bed, you're like, yeah, today's the day where I'm going to go to that tournament and compete. No prep work, and you get picked up, slammed, or whatever, submitted like in 20 seconds. And that's it. Like, don't do that. Get ready for it. But yeah, I don't, that's why I said like no but in the beginning because I think a martial arts journey and experience is tailored to each person for like what they want to do. And if, do the Cobra Kai route, get all your, all Valley Brazilian Jiu Jitsu championships out of the way, do it. I think that's fine. Um, but if you don't want to either, be that guy. Cause, you talked about Buddy from TFTC. Like, I think some of the urgent legends, Jesus, I can't talk. Urban legends about Ricardo Laboria was that the guy didn't compete, but he would go in and just smash everybody in the gym, like even the high level guys, and would just like go back to work like he was like a bank teller or something. He'd come in during lunch, change out of his suit, go on the mat, just beat the shit out of everybody. Like, oh, I gotta go back to work. Lunch is over. Gets the suit back on, goes back to work. But then like later on he competed or whatever. It just like his level was just so high because all he did was train. Like you said, you could put the time in on the mat, and if you kept that attitude, like you said, if you don't compete, you ain't shit. We would have honestly, I think like the schools would be way emptier, to be honest with you, because I'd like to see kind of like what a percentage breakdown would be for uh people who actively compete versus they just go in and do Brazilian jiu-jitsu or grappling or whatever. I would find that like really interesting actually to see what those demographics are.
Well,
And
I bet you it would differ from gym to gym because you have gyms that's the culture. They're
yeah,
competitors. And so it would change from gym to gym, but I bet you overall, and this is just random numbers, but like you figure, if if less than 10% of the population trains in martial arts, I bet you 10% of the gyms that train in martial arts compete. I bet you it's something similar to that. Like it's still the small percentage of the schools that go and compete. Um,
yeah,
yeah, that'd be my opinion. I mean, and I also think there's a lot of value to what is your sustainable ability. Not to say that devalues the hard work people put in preparation for competition, but what are you doing from day to day? What is your I'm not a mathematician, but what is your mean? What is your average, your
yeah, yeah,
base,
yeah,
right? Like where are you at on your average day, your worst day and your best day, and what's the middle ground that you sustain over time? And it's that baseline steadily increasing and getting better over time. Because you might have trained uh in preparation for a competition, you feel like you're at your peak and you go into competition that day and it's just not your day.
yeah.
That should not be a reflection of your abilities overall. And it doesn't mean you should just like wipe the slate clean and start from scratch or that, you know what I mean? Like all the time you put in was wasted because you could go and compete the next day and crush it. And so I think all those things matter, and which is why I'm saying also that I think if you're going to go the competition route, you should compete often, and not just once a year if you're really talking about measuring somebody's ability by their performance in a tournament because it could be different from day to day and you're not getting a baseline of that athlete's ability from one competition or one super fight. It's just not happening because styles make fights and how you feel that day matters. And sometimes there's an element of luck. I mean, there's an adage, the harder I train, the luckier I get. And I think there's truth to that. So
No, absolutely. Because I mean, it is like I was saying before, like you gotta put your best foot forward. You cannot just roll out of bed. So, like you said, prepare for it, train for it. But what is you want to do competition? What is your average right there? What's your mean? Is I think the sustainability thing is something that's not really looked at often unless you're really deep into like competition or coaching athletes or, running a competition team and stuff like that. Because after a while, like, the body breaks down. The like not just the body, but like, the mentality sometimes does too. And that's okay. That's just human nature, in my opinion. Like 6 months in a row, all you've been doing is prepping for competitions. Like if you want to see an exercise and like barely holding it together sometimes, hang out with like a high school or a college wrestling team where they have to make like they're making weight every week. It is insane. I was very fortunate that I was not in often in the position where I had to cut weight to like hit a certain weight class, but like, my brother did. And I remember watching him be so hungry, and it was like we're getting ready to go to like regionals or whatever. He would make a sandwich, cut the sandwich like it was, not a big sandwich, but a pretty decent sized sandwich. Two loaves or not two loaves of bread, two pieces of regular bread, whatever. Cut it in like a triangle, take a big bite out of it, chew it up, and open up the trash can, and spit it out. Because that's you're gonna make weight, or you're gonna not compete. Like a lot's riding on you. So that's like wrestling season's like 4 months maybe. Like there is no off season in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's go 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 go. Now, mind you, you're probably not competing every week unless you're in a really great area for stuff like that. But what's the recovery time afterwards? What's the how long can you do it mentally? Like, and it does take a toll. And if you can pull it off, great. If not, like I understand. So I think that's something a lot of people don't factor in. That's a really good point you brought up.
Well, and I think too that you look at the divisions where they're set up. I mean, you've got this is somewhat in jest, but somewhat serious as well. I mean, I almost feel like you should have divisions for hobbyists or people that have full-time jobs, and then divisions for people that are just lifetime trainers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I
Because
get that.
it's frustrating because all this stuff factors in. Like now I say that, and then you've got guys like DeAndre Corby who just cleaned house, and the guy works a full-time 40-hour a week job, and goes out there and kills it. And I could keep hammering down and selling my belief in ecological dynamics and constraints-led approach and talk about how that plays in, but we'll stay away from that conversation right now. But my whole thing is, you've got people that have the ability due to their lifestyle that they can commit all of their time, their full-time job hours that the rest of us are spending at work, in various levels of demanding professions, that may work night shift or rotating schedules or have different types of physical or mental stress attached to it. And then they're trying to compete as well. And I don't think it's a fair expectation to put them in the same division as somebody who does nothing because mommy and daddy pay the bills and they can go and compete and train 6 days a week, and be on a dedicated regimen with a personal trainer and all this other stuff. And you're like, I mean, you're putting in the work, you earn it. You deserved it because you put in the work. Nobody gets there without the work.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying those are the things that competition doesn't really account for, in my opinion, the way that the format is set up right now. You've got the Masters division for older folks like us, right? And I mean, most of the guys that compete in the Masters division are probably people that are working honest jobs and have had their heyday and are beyond it. And I think that's a fair shake. God knows if I decide to go compete as a black belt, that's where I'll be. But there's just a lot of things to take in. And that's why all I'm saying is, I don't put words in Rob's mouth, but all I'm saying is competition is not inherently good or inherently bad. It depends. It's a depends situation. Not depends like if you're masters and what you wear under your gi. I'm not talking about
Hey,
those kinds of
man.
depends, but no judgment, no judgment. Uh, but it's more that it is something to think about. It's something to experience, but is not the measuring stick by which we should be using for promotions or skill level ability. Because like no, get a guy out of a full-time competitor, get him out of his prime when he's not training up or doing a workup for a fight. Put him on the mat, see where he's at, and there's going to be some hobbyists out there that'll eat his lunch.
Yeah.
Somebody, not saying all, but somebody out there will, and that's jujitsu, man. Like that's why we talked last episode with Aaron and we talked about what makes a black belt. That's what we said. It's not a linear measurement of skill. None of this is. The mats don't lie. That's the truth, right?
Absolutely. I mean, like I totally agree with that. The sentiment of the mats don't lie. I follow that, I followed that for a long time. But yeah, the I did laugh about like, oh yeah, that depends that the Masters wear. I was just like, damn it, man, because I remember my having to eventually accept the fact that I was aging out of the adult division into the Masters division because it was in Arizona, and I was like, fuck, these guys are so fast and strong. I hate this. And then went to the Masters division. I'm like, all right, this is better. We're good here. This is way better. But yeah, I get what you're saying about like the changing up like divisions. Like this is the division for everybody who trains like 80 hours a week, and this is the division for people who need to keep their fingers, healthy so they can go back to their job on Monday. Like I'm okay with that, but I think I don't know about that. I feel like that might be doing a disservice, like you said. The gentleman you were talking about who has a full-time job and is like just killing people. Um, I think it's just at the end of the day, like there are just some people that are better than me, and I can accept that. Like, if Gordon Ryan comes up to me and he's, because technically, like without degrees, we're both black belts, right? And if he comes up to me, he's like, Rob, you suck. I'm like, you know what? You're right. I absolutely do. comparatively speaking. But my belt is my belt for that reason. And my coach entrusted me with it. And I think at the end of the day, when your coach gives you that trust that you're supposed to move up, whether you compete or not, at the end of the day, that's what it's supposed to be about, like you had said. So you didn't put words in my mouth. You did make me laugh about diapers though, because I'm mentally a 6-year-old boy. So when it comes to pooping pants, it's still funny to me. But I
Well,
think it's
you touched on something there too that I think we're both getting at, and I think that this factors into the conversation about competitions too. Is the journey in jiu-jitsu, when people get hung up on measuring themselves against other people as the sole basis for knowing if they're good or not,
yeah,
or if that's the reason why they do the sport and they don't enjoy it unless they're beating somebody else, I think that's where it becomes problematic. Now, you go to competition, you should try to win. You should try to beat other people. That's the whole
yeah,
point. But the journey at its core should be about you. And I don't mean to sound corny in saying that. I'm not trying to be cliche. I'm being serious about it. The belt journey is the same thing. And I made that mistake for years, saying, "Well, I don't deserve this belt because so and so is better than me." Well, it doesn't matter. It's not their journey. It's mine. And if you sit there and you say, "Well, Rob, you don't deserve your black belt because you can't beat Gordon Ryan." I mean, we can all see the problem inherent in that. That's fucking stupid.
yeah,
And while Gordon Ryan has a occasional D-bag persona on social media, I'd be willing to bet that if he were in this conversation now, he wouldn't say that. He wouldn't say, "Rob, you suck,"
yeah,
because I think a guy like that recognizes everybody's journey is a little bit different, right? And he put in work, regardless of anybody that wants to say shit about steroid usage and all that stuff. Steroids don't just make success.
no,
You still have to put in the time. You still have to put in the work. You still have to be that committed to it, and you still have to have the balls to go out there on the mat and go against the best in the world and do what you do. So like, I'm not casting shade, but I'm just saying, I bet you the best in the world don't think like that. They don't measure themselves against a black belt that works a full-time job and no, they're probably like, "Hey, good for you, man. Good
yeah,
for you." Like that's probably what they say. So that just something for people to think about, especially newer people in grappling. Don't lose sight of why you're doing what you're doing and try not to. You will. We all fall into it. Try not to measure yourself or your value in martial arts against somebody else's abilities or what they do to you on the mat or in competition because it's stupid.
no. I mean, that's perfect. Like my comparison was kind of just like you articulated my comparison perfectly. So thank you. Like I need the assist on that, but no, I think this. I hope people got a lot out of this one as well because it's between competition and like comparisons and stuff. Like it is kind of a monster to deal with, but I think hopefully the wise words of Randy and Rob, reach some ears and help you guys out. So, but ladies and gentlemen, that's another episode of the Big Jiu Jitsu Show. I'm Rob.
I'm Randy.
We'll catch you guys next time.